that real quick. Welcome to the Think Tank. Each day we share the news in open dialogue and discuss how it might affect the business world. We speak with different leaders on crisis management and navigation, as well as experts in professional and personal self betterment. It's meant to be a break in learning and sharing of good news, and most importantly, ideas to start people moving forward, thinking different. It's called the Think Tank. We've got a few joining us on Zoom today. There's T. Scott Anderson, top left corner, or I'm not sure what corner you may have, but he is a producer extraordinaire, capturing sports and live television as well as documentary. Thanks for joining, Scott. There is Doug
When
Carroll.
allowed.
When allowed. Doug Carroll, advisor, counselor to boardrooms and senior executives in their time of challenge and crisis, helping them develop plans to do so. And then there is Robbie Sawyer from Thinker Society, helping brands and individuals understand how they can be more innovative and creative with unique experiences, framework, and education. And finally, our special guest of the day, Travis Thomas. Now, let me tell you about Travis. I have a little information on him here, if I can find it real quick. Travis, thank you for joining, Travis. This is going to be fun. Is the founder of Live. Yes,
Live.
Yeah,
Live.
that's the first thing I learned about. Don't have the title of an organization where you can pronounce it two ways. Yeah.
Well, he wants you to be live and talk about live. Yes, and as we all know, as thinkers, we know a lot about yes and, so it'll be interesting to hear his perspective. But he shares his interactive and inspiring message of purpose, authenticity, collaboration to audiences and companies across the U.S. For over 20 years, Travis has performed as an improvisational comedian, performance coach, and corporate training specialist. His coaching practice combines principles of improv, personal performance that help individuals and organizations with their mindset, culture, and collaboration. For the last 5 years, Travis has worked solo under his company, Live, yes, and works regularly, I had to think for a second there, with Georgia football, Chicago Cubs, Miami Marlins, Cincinnati Reds, New York Yankees, and he's the author of 3 Words for Getting Unstuck. Live, yes, and. Travis lives in Florida with his wife and 3 kids and continues to perform on stage and train athletes. Thank you for joining, Travis.
Oh, happy to be here. And I just love, I mean, there was a 50-50 chance, right? Yeah. Whether it was live or live. And that's
and I missed it. Yeah.
That is, that's when you're a solopreneur and you're like, I should probably bounce this name off of somebody, and you don't. And then the number of times I've been announced at speaking events as live yes and I was like, I need to yes and that somehow. And so for a while I was doing a daily stream called Yes and Live. So it was Live Yes and presents Yes and Live. So it's you roll with it, you yes and it, you find a way to make it work. So, but no, really happy to be here, guys. Appreciate it. And I apologize for coming over late. I was wearing my performance coach hat and had to jump off one Q&A and jump over to here, but happy to be here.
So you left them all over there doing push-ups, huh?
Yeah. Luckily there's myself and another guy who I could say, all right, you take it from here. And so
well, I think most of us on here know the yes and approach, but it's probably be appropriate to begin with giving us an explanation as to why yes and why did you name your company as much?
Yeah, so if you all have a nice basic understanding of yes and coming as the foundation of improvisation, and again, like you mentioned, I got into improv comedy 20 years ago. My wife and I had just moved to Boston. I went to a show opening weekend, and it was one of those moments where I'm like, I need to do that. Not that I need to be a performer, but I need to know how they do that, because that's amazing. I don't know what's that skill set, where's that come from? And so I signed up for the training center the next Monday. Fast forward a year and a half later, I went through all 6 levels of the training center. I was hooked and ended up auditioning for the cast. That was a touring company. I made my way up to the developmental cast. Developmental cast came up to the main stage cast, which I performed at in Boston for a few years. Moved to Florida and started a group down here with two other gentlemen that we've been performing consistently since 2004 down here in Florida. But all along, I was really enthralled with the principles of improvisation. As someone who grew up playing sports and being a coach, and at the time I was working sort of in the corporate space in Boston, and I was married. So I had like relationships, and I had corporate relationships, and I had sports mindsets, and improv just seemed to, for me, to spread across all these different areas. And so, fast forward to 2004, 2005, living in Florida, I get let go from the website that I'm working for at the time. And I have that big question of, what do I really want to do with my life? And I'm like, all right, I want to do what I'm doing now. I wanted to do that 15 years ago. I didn't know that the path was going to be 15 years to get to the point of where I am now. Thank God I didn't know that, because I wouldn't have done it. And so here I am, having had the opportunity to do a lot of interesting things, even though the journey has been really, really difficult. Again, that's made the journey that much more interesting. But so that path has taken me into the world of personal development, into corporate development and corporate training, into sports psychology and mental skills, systemic culture, working in all those different fields and those different worlds. And then, 5 years ago, after I was working at IMG Sports Academy down in Florida, and decided that I really just wanted to be able to authentically work with groups and individuals and teams under, that resonated best with me. And so when it came to deciding on the name, Yes And, I knew Yes And had to be a part of it, but the full title wasn't coming. But then I thought back, like, what have I been doing for the last dozen years with my family? And truly, my wife and I, we have 3 kids, we had truly been trying to live these principles of improvisation, to live what it means to approach life from a yes and mindset. And I was like, that's it, right? I've been living yes and. That's what I want to do with groups and teams and individuals, is to share these ideas of how you live yes and in these different aspects of your life. And for me, in the world of improvisation, yes and is acceptance. Acceptance and agreement is the yes. I'm accepting what you're giving me. I'm accepting what is happening. The and is how I build or collaborate with that idea or with that offer. So that's how it works on stage. Everything is yes anded off of each other. We're total collaboration, and it's yes and, yes and, yes and. Well, in life, it's no different. How do you yes and with everything that life is presenting you, good or bad, especially the bad? We talk about how we've all been impacted by this pandemic. I was waiting for my ticket from the U.S. men's national team to go over to Europe for 2 weeks to go play a game in Holland, and then go play a game in Wales and hang out with the men's national team. And I was like, finally, like, this is my dream. And it's like, no, you're not doing that. So how do we respond to what is happening, to be as collaborative, to be in collaboration with reality, is how I like to say it. And so to live yes and is to be in total collaboration with reality, and responding in a way that connects you to your purpose, and makes sure that how you are responding is connected authentically to your purpose.
That's interesting, because for the most part, from my understanding and the way we preach it anyway, this will make this perhaps a little deeper, richer, or you have anyway, with how we normally use it. But yes and for us typically has been, it's that taking out the negativity and the loud voices in collaboration that say, no, that's not right. Or instead, it's the open of, yes, okay, now let's add to that. So that's a really interesting, completely different kind of perspective as to how that goes. So,
and I call that yes and 3.0. There's yes and 1.0, which is the stage. There's yes and 2.0, which is how this is relevant in the corporate space and how this is relevant in the team space. And I really feel that yes and 3.0 is how it truly is relevant to our personal life and all of our life. And part of what I say is you don't have to like what's happening, but you have to say yes to it. Right? We don't have to like the pandemic, but we have to accept the fact that it's happening. So how are we going to yes and it?
have to deal with reality and then figure out what you're going to do.
Travis, when companies contact you, are they looking for a certain thing that are they trying to understand how to put that yes and into practice, or is that something that you have to really teach them about?
Yeah, I think when most companies contact me, there's the improv component. Bringing improvisation into the corporate world is nothing new. It's been out there for a long time, and so I have that component when I'm having conversations in the corporate world. What I focus on probably more than anything nowadays, Scott, is addressing the overall cultural systemic mindset and collaboration of the organization. And so having a performance coach background now, I like to say that we're going to address mindset collaboration, purpose, mindset, and collaboration within your organization. And I happen to use the principles of improvisation as a way to share that, to demonstrate it, and to feel it. There are great organizations out there. The theater I used to perform at, Improv Asylum in Boston, fantastic. Second City, they've been doing it for years. You guys have 4-day weekend right in your backyard down there in Dallas, Fort Worth. So there's great companies that do the improv in the corporate space. I don't try to compete with them. I'm really trying to go even, in my opinion, more deeply ingrained into the overall culture and ethos and a holistic approach to things.
What was it like the first time you went on stage to do improv? I mean, were you normally a public speaker, or was that, there's real people out there and they're looking at me? How did that go?
So I've always been probably a cheeseball growing up. And so I say that, improv is easy when you've made a fool out of yourself your entire childhood.
Okay.
And so, but to that point, no, I was absolutely nervous. The first public show was a graduation show. You went through all 6 levels of the training center and you put on a graduation show for friends and family, and it was open to the public. And it's funny, my wife usually tells a story because the lights were down and I was in the first sketch of the show, and we had written sketches and then obviously you do the improv. And I was in the first written sketch, and she remembers the lights going down and panicking. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous for him. I hope he doesn't suck. And the lights came up and we did the first scene, and she's like, all right, after that, I wasn't nervous for you anymore. And so, obviously a year and a half of the training center, I kind of had a sense that, okay, I can do this. But to that point, I still get nervous. I still get nervous before every show. And as a performance coach, I teach this all the time. It's the difference between being nervous and being excited. Physiologically, it's the same things going on in the body. It's just a matter of how we're framing it with our mind. And so when I feel that nerves, I'm like, oh, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. But I still get that excitement before I perform or speak or jump on a Zoom.
Travis, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you have a speaking engagement and you incorporate the concept of the interactive and the potential, well, I guess my question is, do you have other professionals with you that perhaps do improv, or do you actually just bring people up from the audience?
Yeah, I use the audience.
You do.
So
yeah.
Yes, and so
so you demonstrate with live talent. That's interesting.
Yes, I demonstrate with with volunteers or people that I've chosen, and you're going to be my volunteer. Mm-hmm. And so I have done corporate training with the theater that I used to perform with, and obviously when they do corporate training, they bring in a cast of 5 or 6 instructors. But doing it on my own here, I actually love the thrill of doing it with audience members, where it's truly different every time. But yeah, so when I structure a presentation, whether it's for a couple hundred or whether it's for 30, it's going to be just as interactive. I just have to scale how I use the interaction for large groups. But I'm always bringing people up to demonstrate, and then if it's a large group, I'm having them do it with the partner or the people sitting next to them. And the reason I do it that way is I'm just sharing this with this college class that I was teaching this past week. Is when it comes to, at the end of the day, I'm talking about leadership. I'm talking about um, uh, mental skills. We're talking about collaboration. We're talking about culture. And all of us here can talk about any of these ideas in a way that are common sense, and intellectually we all get it and we all understand it and we're all rational about it. What I try to do in my talks is create experience where people feel it. And one of the things I love to do, and if you guys find any of my videos online, I think this one's probably on my website, but for the last 2 years or plus, I've started almost all of my presentations the same way. And I did this for the first time working with the New York Yankees minor league players in Tampa. And I was working with a group of about 50 guys. And I was just feeling like I need to do something new. I want to do something new at the beginning of the presentation where it's not just read my bio, here's my bio, here I am, and we get into it. I need something that sets the tone from the get-go without me saying a word. And so I tried this and it worked so well, I've used it ever since and continue to use it. But I took the song. So sometimes I will do this. I'll get introduced and I'll say, hey, great guys, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about performance today. How many of you out there would call yourself courageous or leaders? And if you're talking to a group of high performers, athletes or just high performers, most people raise their hand. I'm like, awesome. And then I hit my slide, which is an audio. It's 50 Cent Into Club. If you guys remember that song, dun, dun, it's just the instrumental. So it's, it's just bump, bump. And people were like, oh yeah, all right. What are we doing here? We got a little jam going. And so I just grab someone in the first row and I don't say a word to them. And I just stand them up and I look at them, I stand them up and I reach down and I do this and I put this in their hands like this. There's nothing there. I just go like this. Then I go walk and stand about 10 yards away from them. And I'm looking at them and we're face to face and I go like this. And to the beat, like dun, 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 dun. And so we just start mirroring each other. And then someone in the audience will say, they're doing the double Dutch, right? It's double Dutch ropes is what we're swinging, right? And so you got the beat going, dun, 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 and I just start looking at the audience, waiting to see who's going to come up and start jumping in imaginary ropes. And I've only had it happen. Actually, I haven't had it happen once where nobody comes up. I've had it happen twice where only one person comes up. Same group, financial advisors in Chicago. But undoubtedly, one person comes up and they get in and they start doing the double Dutch and they jump out. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 more people come up and they do it. And it's always, for me, I'm like, I never know what's going to happen. So we do that activity. However many people come up, the song stops. I'm like, all right. And I say, I asked you all how many of you guys are courageous and how many of you are leaders. For those of you who did not come up to jump, why? And I'm like, be honest, come on, why? Why didn't you jump? And like, I didn't want to look stupid. I was afraid. And so they give me all the reasons of what prevents us as leaders or individuals to be courageous or to stand out from the group and look silly or do it. Once you knew that what needed to be done, were you willing to do it? And why didn't you do it? And so I can talk about leadership and we can talk about courage and whether you have it or not, or I can give you an opportunity to see how you respond in that situation. So I try to do that throughout my presentations to feel the idea instead of just talking about the idea.
So we've this show, which I think we're on episode 42. Thank you, everybody. And our focus has been moving forward. At the beginning, it was, okay, we're in this mess. How do we move forward? How do we get through it? And in the last couple of weeks, we've now moved into how do we think different? How do we start doing what we used to do? How do we do it different? Because it's a new now. And so what do you see happening in your world that you're having to do exactly the yes and that you're having to pivot on that your clients are seeing? So has the request or the concern or the ask to you changed, and is what you're doing different now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I went from all of my work being, traveling and in person to none of that being possible. And so So how do you pivot? How do you adapt? And I'm on two different executive speaking teams. And so one of them contacted me immediately and said, "Hey, I'm reaching out to all the clients that we've worked with, and we're going to offer, I want to offer free talks to their staff. And are you, if they do that, are you okay speaking for free?" I was like, "Absolutely. We're going to nurture those relationships that we've built with clients. And when and if and how we come out on the other side of this, we'll hopefully that'll reflect well on our relationship. And this is our opportunity to be good stewards and put ourselves out there." And so through that speaking team alone, I've probably done 30 plus Zoom talks.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Either to companies as well as we do a lot with high school sporting teams as well.
Right.
I actually have one. The one that I have here at 4:00 Eastern my time is a baseball team up in the Northeast through that organization.
Okay.
The other organization I'm with is Russell Wilson's Limitless Minds. I don't know if you guys have followed any of what Russell's doing with Trevor Moawad is his mental conditioning coach. Trevor and I are friends. Trevor and I have been working together for a number of years now, and they have me on the Limitless Minds speaking team. And so we've worked with a lot of clients for the last couple of years, and so supporting them as well. And then just my individual work, I put out, I think, Scott, the reason we're here today is because I think I put out on, I individually connected with all the clients that I've worked with individually in the last few years. And then I put out on LinkedIn and social media, "Hey, I'm just making myself available during this time." And
the fact that you taught Jordan how to do improv.
I introduced Jordan to improv. Jordan took it from there. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm very fond of Scott Sun. Got to spend a lot of time with him when he was at boarding school, and he is an amazing improviser. I'm pretty sure he's better than I am. And so I'll take whatever credit I can get for introducing him to improv, and I've had the opportunity to perform with him a few times, which has been a lot of fun. So
actually, Jordan flew out from Boston. Where was it? Pittsburgh? That you guys hooked up?
Yeah, actually, just about a year ago, and we got a chance to perform together again. The idea of yes-anding opportunities and yes-anding challenges more than anything. And so, to be honest with you, Sam, I don't know what my career is going to look like moving forward. Right. I'm doing work right now with the men's national senior soccer team, and that's all remote right now as well. And I'm on a few Zoom calls with them a week, and I was just on the phone with the U20 national team and doing some training with them. But I don't know what my work is going to look like, if it's going to be a hybrid of online and in person. And so I'm in that space. I've been so busy, it's been hard to be in the reflective space. So it's that balance of trying to be open to new opportunity, and at the same time trying to do and stay as active as possible.
Well, let's try some improv. Go, Doug.
Doug, all right.
No, okay. So
I'm happy to go. And everyone else laughs right at me. So Sam throws the softball at the guy who can go for 4 hours on that.
I love it, Doug. I'm ready.
No, but Travis, why don't you? It's really interesting and fascinating to see these principles being put to work like that. Why don't you give us and whoever else is joining in here? Are there some simple little steps that you can give us, or maybe mindsets that we should look at and use for our everyday? Not necessarily to go be an improvisational comedian, but in general, that how we should approach our challenges in these crazy times.
Hey, Sam, before you do that,
I'm sorry, what was that?
Before you do that, let me frame something in your space before you give us some guidance.
Okay.
So I have been in the process the last 4 to 5 days of helping draft 15 to 20 corporate responses to the George Floyd situation.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and the interesting thing is part of what I didn't know it until I worked with Steve Jobs, but yes, and has been a big part of what we've done since Steve really framed that for me.
Yeah.
And what has interesting, and I believe it, Sam, I'll keep this short, is the conversations we've had over the last few days with CEOs have been not just how do we frame this in a politically correct, corporate correct way to make a response.
Yeah.
But it has been the first time I've heard these guys talk about yes and in a societal way, in a cultural way that wasn't tied to my quarterly earnings.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get short.
No, it's okay.
Hard for me, right, Sam? Anyway, the point is you think about what you're doing. Any help you've got as we shift. One of my CEOs, I thought he framed it perfectly. We've been talking for the last 3 months about the new normal. He goes, that's not good enough. It's got to be the new better.
I like that.
Yeah, I told him I was going to steal that, and he said I could. So, but anything you could give in your framework to help us not just look at yes and in a way to make it about our leadership and our corporate and our meeting with our 5 to 500 leaders, but something has changed in the last 8 days. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, Doug, that's a great question. I think this context is relevant. I was telling the guys at the beginning here, I just spent the last 5 days, 5 work days on 8-hour Zoom calls with 15 socially conscious entrepreneur students, 14 in Guatemala, 1 in Colombia. And these are students. Not all of them have launched a business, but they're inspired to launch a socially conscious business. And the conversation, ultimately went to why, right? What are you trying to create and why? And if we use Simon Sinek for a second as the foundation of our why, right? What is our individual why? What is our organizational why? For me, I use the word purpose. Purpose from the standpoint of not what you do, but as the motivating force for why you do everything that you do. My individual purpose is to inspire myself and others to live their authentic brilliance. So that's my purpose. So I take that purpose, that's my why, to inspire myself and others to live their authentic brilliance. So whether I'm doing that with the national team, or whether I'm doing that with the Cubs, or whether I'm doing that with a school or a high school baseball team, or in an organization, or as a parent and a spouse, as a friend, the driving force into everything that I do is to inspire myself and others to live their authentic brilliance. Am I showing up that way? Is what I'm doing right now a reflection of my why, of my purpose? And I think right now what's happening between the pandemic and the George Floyd and the racial tension in our country right now is that it is forcing us individually, and it's forcing us organizationally to get really clear on who we are and what we're about. And there's a good chance that some organizations might be coming to the realization for the first time that it's not just about the bottom line, and it's not just about the quarterly numbers, and that there is a bigger purpose and why they exist as an organization. And I think if we use that as our starting point when we ask, how do I respond to a situation like this, where is it PC enough, or is it, when we try to say the right words and we try to do all the right thing, I think if it's genuinely coming from our true, clear why and motivation, that is sort of that North Star, that's that compass, that's the guiding direction that gives us a basis to ask how we're going to respond to this. And I think individually we're having to do that. And I think organizationally we're having to do that.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with everything you said. One thing that's coming out is that's interesting in this process for the folks I'm working with is they're not always liking what they're seeing.
No.
You know, as you take a step back and this lifts it, like you said, beyond the quarterly earnings and you know the why of what am I about. The reflections have not always been what everybody wants to see, and that makes it hard to write it's making it really hard for a lot of people to write a public statement that has any authenticity in it for them.
Yeah. And I think to that point, it's going to be near impossible right now to take any stand and not upset somebody.
Right.
It's impossible. I mean, that's the nature of taking a stand, right? Is when you stand for something, in essence, you're standing against something else. Mm-hmm. would be what you're faced with. So you got to ask yourself, what do I stand for?
and do I have the courage to do that?
And do I have the courage to do that? Absolutely. And
one of the things I'll add is just because you're standing for something doesn't mean you're standing against something else.
Yeah.
And let me add, say this: silence is also interpreted as a stance. And,
absolutely, Kimball. Yeah.
You know, how do we?
Silence is a decision.
Silence is okay.
Okay, and actions are decisions. Therefore, if you have silence, it is an action, and there is consequence in those decisions and actions.
Yeah.
We're fighting. That's one we're fighting right now. Is well, I think my company shouldn't say, or I shouldn't say anything because we're not equipped. We're not. Well, we're at a moment when people are interpreting silence as an action.
Yeah. I had a conversation, with the national team head coach, beginning of the week. And cause we have a WhatsApp text string going with about 50 players in the national team pool. So it's the coaches and us. It's us as the coaches and the players who are in this WhatsApp stream. And this is our way of staying engaged with them through all this time. And he and I had the conversation. And it was like, he's like, we need to say something, but we need to make sure that we're, very intentional about what we're saying. And it's difficult because when you do represent an organization or you represent a federation, and then you also represent your players and you represent yourself. And so it can become really complicated to sort of navigate those waters. And,
an interesting point is even the best intention can be misread. Look at Drew Brees. He probably thought he was, just trying to be a positive force for good. And he got lambasted for what he said. So it's a tough call.
But Kimball, that goes to my point is he stood for something, and in his heart and mind, it was about his grandfather and respect for the flag. That doesn't mean he was standing against,
right. But unfortunately, it was
or the plight of his own black teammates. He wasn't standing against that.
Right.
But
that's a whole nother. I mean, this could go on for forever, just based on what we're talking about. But I personally believe that what you're saying, Scott, is 100% true. And in that scenario, he would have been better suited to not say anything.
But that goes to Doug's point: is silence.
Well, I know, but unfortunately, the world we live in right now is people are going to interpret whatever you say and spin it in ways that can, that mean nothing, that has nothing to do with what you said. Yeah. That's the unfortunate thing about it.
Yeah. And again, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this topic, and I'm sure we all have, varying views on that, what's going on. I think since we're having a yes and conversation, when I saw Drew's post, what I thought was missing was the yes and from his perspective. Was you can be pro You can be pro flag, and you can be pro military, and you can be pro justice and civil rights for your teammates, FYI, that are 70% African American.
Yeah.
70% of the guys in your locker room are feeling the direct impact of the thing that you had the opportunity to support them about. And I think, and again, to get back, in the yes and world, it's like, I am pro-American and I'm pro, social rights. And I think when the silence of leaving that out is what spoke volumes, at least probably to the other guys in the locker room, and the other 70% in the National Football League, who felt like, whoa, like we're your brothers, right? We didn't hear you, or we didn't feel you. And I will also say, to his credit, is that I feel that how he has come out today, and how he has apologized, and again, he didn't have to apologize.
But the chosen silence.
Yeah, the fact that he did, and the fact and what he has said, I think also speaks volumes too. And so, this is tough. This is tough. Complicated stuff. And at the end of the day, each of us, I'm facing this myself. I have passionate views on this topic, but I know anything that I post online is going to have consequences. It could be positive, it could be negative. I could lose, a client or gain a client based on what I choose to say publicly. And so I think what all of us, at the end of the day, when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we're like, okay, do I feel good about the choices that I made? Do they feel true and authentic to me? And if they do, then I can probably deal with the consequences that come my way.
But I just want to say thank you, because I think you've articulated part of why Yes and is such a good tool, right? It helps you walk your way through the not just the options, but the potentialities of this, and so I appreciate that. Yeah,
I think that gets to, we live in a society right now. Good Lord, do we live in a society right now that it's either or.
Right.
It's black and white. It's black and white. It's one. There is no room for nuance. There's no room for, I can be this, and I can be, no, you're either this or you're this, and there's nothing in between. And when you look at from our politics to everything that's going on, it's no, the only thing that exists is the gray. If you're living in black and white, you're probably the minority, because I think everyone I talk to is living in the gray. I'm this and I'm this. I agree with this, but I don't agree with this. And we know this, right? The media lives in the extremes, but the majority lives in the gray area. But the gray area is that's not as sexy to throw on the news. But so the yes and thinking, the other term I've used, I haven't used it, I've heard, that I think is fantastic, especially when we encounter problems that we tend to approach it two-way thinking. It's this or it's this. And I love the concept of third-way thinking. And for me, yes and is all about third-way thinking. It's, can we elevate? Is there another solution that
it is acknowledging where we are, but it's always looking for that solution.
And it's inclusive. It's inclusive of the whole. I am pro social justice. I'm also pro police force. I'm both. So we can include everybody in the solution, and we need to be, because all we do is, if we're just going back and picking sides, it's who has the power now, who has power now. And so I think the yes and opportunity is, how can we be truly inclusive and have everybody a part of the process? And we know that's where true buy-in comes in anyway, with any team or organizations, when people feel that they truly have, they're a stakeholder, and that it's not one person's idea, it's the collective idea. And so therefore I'm accountable and I'm responsible because I was a part of this process. Just a quick little side note. I had this experience a few years ago. A friend of mine is a school superintendent in Michigan. I grew up right outside. Well, I actually grew up in Flint, Michigan, but he is a superintendent right outside of Flint, Michigan. And he had me in to talk to some of his teachers, and I was like, had fun doing that. And he said, "Hey, I don't know if you're free tomorrow." It was a Friday. He said, "I don't know if you're free tomorrow, but tomorrow the superintendent board," he goes, "we're meeting with the teachers union." And he's like, "It's usually a brutal day of negotiation." And he's like, "Would you be willing to come in at the beginning of the day and like do a little yes and with everybody?" I was like, "All right, sure, yeah." He goes, "You don't have to talk about things being contentious. You don't have to." He goes, just share your yes and with the group." And so I came in the next morning, did a little yes and workshop, did some of these activities, these typical activities that I do, which gave them some language and gave them some framework. And I did my hour, and then I'm like, "I got to go. See you guys." And they spent a day of negotiating. And I gave a book talk that night, and he came to the book talk. And I'm like, "Hey, man, how'd the day go?" And he's like, "You're not going to believe it." He goes, "It's the best day of negotiating we've ever had." I'm like, "Wow, what happened?" He said, "Anytime it got contentious and one side was not willing to hear the other's perspective, they would call the other person out and say, aha," because we did this activity called Cross the Line. They'd go, "Hey, you're not crossing the line. You're not crossing the line." And they would it would break the tension, and it would remind them, pause and hear the other person's perspective. And he said, we did that all day. And he goes, it was the most productive negotiating we ever had. And so all of that to say is that all we did is we introduced a third way to think about things. It's not my perspective or your perspective. It's finding that our perspective that ultimately is going to create better solutions anyway.
I think an interesting thing too that's been said here, or it's not necessarily been said, but I think it's true, and what Yes and does really is that everyone right now is trying to be heard, and trying to have their voice or their opinion done. And the Yes and throws a big bucket of cold water on that hostility from either side of whatever, and it says, "Hey, man, I heard you. That's exactly right. I heard you." And that's all most people want, is to be heard. You don't have to agree with them. You just need to say, I heard it, and I respect your opinion. And here's the other thought.
Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah.
Travis.
Oh, wow. Tell me more.
We wrap up our think tanks each day with our guests with a lightning round. So you were not prepared for that on purpose. So unless anyone else has any particular questions, anyone? Okay. I'm going to hit you with the lightning round. Yeah. And
what'd you say? When am I coming to Dallas? Oh man. Between Tex-Mex food, which is my favorite, and just that area in general, hopefully sooner than later, Scott.
Sam can pick up on that right now.
Yes.
Come on, Sam.
Okay, here we go. Are you an early morning or a late night?
I prefer early morning, but when I get up, I prefer to get up, although it's difficult for me to get up. So I'll say early morning.
Barbecue or sushi?
Wow. Vegetarian now, but still love dumping barbecue sauce on tofu.
Do you get your news from the TV, the web, or the newspaper?
That would be online. Yes, online, not
web.
TV.
Okay. Dog or cat?
I'm a dog guy now. Yes.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn?
Unfortunately for my daughter, Instagram, where she says I make a fool of myself every day.
Good. That's good to hear. Beach or mountains?
Woo! Live near the beach, but my wife and I both said if we can't live at the beach, we need to live at the mountains. So I think the mountains might be next, but beach for now.
Avocado toast or bagel?
Avocado toast.
Good. Okay. So what has been or is your guilty pleasure during these times of COVID?
Sneaking out of the house to get my daily coffee, mask and all, gloves were needed. I'm someone who needs to work outside of the house physically. And so I found lots of little like nooks and crannies where I could socially distance and be by myself, but still find someone who'll give me an iced coffee to get there.
Very good. Do you have any closing words or inspiration for the viewers?
I won't have time to get into the whole analogy right now. I'll just give you the cliff notes, but there's an expression that it's in my book, and I've been talking to a lot of people about it right now, and it's this idea of embrace the goo. In the military, you may see the term embrace the suck. Mine is embrace the goo, and for me, the goo comes from when a caterpillar transitions into a butterfly, it goes into its cocoon, which is a tomb, creates its own tomb for itself. Inside the cocoon, the body of the caterpillar completely turns into a black, sticky goo. It's from the goo that the new form of the butterfly forms. It doesn't go from caterpillar to butterfly. It goes from caterpillar to black goo to butterfly. And now what science says is that the goo is rich with nutrients and potential. The goo is rich with nutrients and potential. From the goo, the butterfly, the new everything we're talking about today, a new better is birthed. And so I think as a country, we are in the middle of the goo. As a world in this pandemic, we're in the middle of the goo, and the goo is messy and it's uncomfortable, and it's tragic in so many ways that we're seeing and experiencing. But the goo is good, because from the goo and from the challenge and from the adversity, a new better, to steal that, Doug, a new better is coming. And so embrace the goo.
That was awesome. That's really good. Anyone else? Thank you, Travis. That was a great show. Really appreciate your time and insight.
Hey guys, I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, and I want to do it in person next time. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Good call. Thanks.
When are y'all going to Jupiter?
Or you guys can come to Jupiter.
I'm in Jupiter.
Yes, come on down. Come on down.
Good plan.
Thanks.